Hello and welcome to Clickbait, and today we're talking obscure, obsolete cameras, and today we're mentioning this one, the Fuji Fujica 350 Zoom, which is a camera you may or may not have come across before. But I'm glad I did, and I want to say a massive thank you first of all to my friend Anthony for loaning me this camera, because I'd never seen one before, and when I did, I was gobsmacked, frankly. I've never seen anything like it, and I'm glad I've seen it now. I'm going to start though with a quick question. What do you think of when I say 110 film? Because I think there's basically two camps that come down to this particular thing. First of all, you remember it from when you're a kid and it was your first access to cheap, available, your own personal camera, because a 110 camera was like £10 from Dixon's or Boots in the high street, and you could get your own camera to take on school trips. You went on that school camping trip and you go to Bognor Regis or Chessington World of Adventures and you could take pictures of yourself and your friends on this dreadful little camera, but it was your own, so you got fond memories that way. Alternatively, you remember it as dreadful, low quality, small film, or possibly a third way in fact, if you think of it as like some kind of clever spy format. But anyway, the thing is, 110 is one of a number of formats which have more or less disappeared from the market these days. Towards the end of the 90s, there was really only two film formats in regular use, as far as spiral load cartridge film goes. Of course, there's still like the 5.4 10.8 plate cameras, but that's a different thing, because back in the pre-digital days, if you wanted more resolution, you just got a bigger camera. But during the 1990s and the 80s, there were a number of smaller, more compact formats as people tried to make small, usable cameras that you could just slide into any pocket and be transportable and make them littler and littler. Because with 35mm, getting a small camera was actually quite tricky. You could go down as tiny as something like a little rolly like this, but even then, that was kind of chunky. What else do I have in here? Your average, more affordable 35mm compact was something like this Pentax, which is actually quite a brick, really, in comparison to something like this. So people wanted a small, usable, portable, tiny camera, but mostly you would go to 35mm for that. However, if you really wanted 110, but you wanted high quality, there weren't many options. But of course, leave it to Fuji. When it comes to making something that's high quality and a little bit different, a little bit unusual, they're your man. Look at the Fuji X series cameras. They are just wonderful little perfect jewels of cameras. And this is kind of the same sort of thing. Amazing quality, small form factor, a little bit different, if you know kind of a deal. So anyway, let's have a quick look at this thing. What is it and what is so significant about the Fuji 350 Zoom? Well, first of all, it is really very, very tiny indeed. The big advantage of 110 is the negative. It is absolutely dinky. It's 13 by 17mm, so really, really, really small. So everything else can be small around it. This is the box that the film came in, and this is actually a terrible choice of film for a first use in a camera I've never used before. This is Lomography Lomo Purple, so as well as getting a feel for how the camera works, I've also shot everything in weird colours, and yeah, just looking a bit strange. So great. But anyway, look, this is the camera, and it's about 1 centimetre longer front to back, centimetre longer side to side than just the box that the film itself comes in. So that's really tiny in itself. It's about the same height as the box as well. So that's tiny. It makes it very, very pocketable. If you're wearing a coat with pockets that don't have zips or poppers, so you can just pop things in gently without scratching it, it'll fit into virtually any coat pocket, even some trouser pockets if you're not wearing skinny jeans. The only thing that sticks out from that little square form factor is that lens. I mean, check this nugget out here. This is what makes this camera so very special. Well, one of the things anyway. Because not often are you going to see a 110 camera with a lens that big. I mean, check out the size of that beast. It's a monster. And as the name of the Fujica 350 Zoom implies, it is a zoom lens. Here on top of the camera, there's an N to T little slider, N being normal, I guess, T being telephoto, unless it's a Z for zoom on the left one that's been turned on its side. And that zooms from 25 to 44mm focal length in 110 format terms. Translating that to 35mm terms, which we're all more familiar with, that's about a 50 to 85. So it's not a huge zoom range, but it does give you just a little bit more option to be a bit more creative. So it's not really as wide as you might like in certain circumstances, or as long as you might like in certain circumstances, but it gives you the option of doing a bit of a group shot of some people, or a bit of a wider shot of a building, or you can zoom in and do a tight portrait of a person or a dog or something. So it gives you that option, so that is quite unusual. Significantly, and there's a number of significant things looking at this camera, this is a big first. This is the first time a 110 camera had a built-in zoom lens in the world ever. So that's quite a cool thing. 1976 this camera came out, and a number of sources also suggest that this is the first time a compact camera of any format got a zoom lens built in. I think the Minolta, from memory, was the next one, and some people sort of say that was the first, but I think looking at the dates, this one was a little bit earlier. So this is, you know, a big deal. Now secondly, you've got your zoom on this lens, and it's a chunky little biffer. It's also got a thread. It's got a filter thread in there. I should have measured this before, should have done this off camera. It's about 30mm thread, so that's a big bit of glass on a tiny camera. I mean, it's taller than the height of the camera body, so chunky old thing. But you'll notice this lens it's the huge front element. I think it's 7 elements inside this lens. So again, great quality, amazing technical detail. Normally on a 110 camera, you'll have a single plastic element in the front and you will like it. This is a 7-element manually focusing zoom. So you look at the top of this thing, it's got a focus scale. Closest focus 5 feet or 1.5 meters. That's quite a distance away. Yeah, you need to be remembering to stand well back. And I did come a cropper a bit with this when I was testing the camera, because I kind of forgot how far away you needed to be to some things. And that goes down to infinity, obviously. And this is where things get a little bit tricky, because you have to remember that the viewfinder is over here on the far, well, looking from my back side of the camera, on the far left. The lens is virtually over on the far right. So you do have a certain amount of parallax error built into the thing. Remember that when you're focusing. It's not linked in terms of focus, so you have to have a pretty accurate guessing game at how far you're going to focus the thing away. But even though it's not focus linked, it is zoom linked, so you can see how far you've zoomed in on the frame. And as well as no focusing aid, you've got no framing aid. There are some little white lines in the viewfinder which don't really help you a great deal, so just try and keep things more or less in the middle and hope for the best. Of course, it is tricky focusing without any kind of focusing aids beyond just the scale on the top, but you don't have to worry about it being too accurate, because you've only got 3 apertures. You've got a control here on the top for your exposure. It's a 3-stop slider which shows sun, partly cloudy and cloudy, and also that references 5 meters and 3 meters as well as distance for you as well. But basically what this means is f5.6, f8 and f11. So you're never going to be stopped all the way down to a shallow depth of field. It's always going to be a little bit of depth going on just there, so you're kind of covered no matter what you do. You're going to get it somewhere within that fairly extensive range of focal distance. And the aperture and exposure ties into your shutter speed, which is fixed at a mechanical 125th of a second. And that word mechanical is significant because a lot of vintage cameras, 70s, 80s cameras especially, and some 60s cameras, you pick them up, you want to shoot them, but they use some weird, obsolete, dead mercury kind of battery that you just can't get. So if you want to try and use it, you've either got to gaffer tape a bunch of button cells together, or go and buy a watch battery and a £35 adapter from Amazon in order to make the thing work. Not in this case. There is no battery. It's purely mechanical, which is just wonderful. So you can pick this up. It's never going to have gone flat in your bag. It's always going to be ready for you, which is just marvellous. A real treat in today's world of vintage cameras with obsolete batteries. That is fabulous. So your exposure is always going to be 125th of a second and one of 3 apertures, which makes life very easy indeed. As is using the camera. Loading it is pretty much a doddle. A big flap on the back of the camera. Most of the back of the camera opens up, little squeezy button on the top, pull that down, camera opens up, and there's a window in there as well, so you can see what your exposure number is on the back of the film. It's printed on the backing paper of the 110 film. Your 110 cartridge just slots in there, that closes up, and you're ready to go pretty much. The only worry with that is that's quite easy to brush and open, so you could potentially open that on your clothing if you're not too careful, but it didn't happen to me, so I'm guessing I'm overthinking this. Your wind on wheel is under here, the viewfinder, and that scrolls off to the left as you look into the camera. So if you are trying to wind it on and keep your eye to the viewfinder, you are basically putting your thumb up your nose, so not the easiest. Wind that on until you see the click or feel the click with the cartridge in there. That then primes the shutter, which is this little silver disc on the top, and click, you've shot your picture. Amazing. So incredibly easy to use. Just remember to set your zoom, set your focus, set your aperture. So 3 stages after you've wound on, click and done. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. But it doesn't stop there though. Fuji, being Fuji, always give you more. If you look at their little X series digital cameras, those are just so good and so feature laden that you can be lost in the menu, and they can make them so truly customizable and your own. It kind of goes back all the way back to this. This was actually a part of a lineup of Fuji 110 cameras that were aimed at the more discerning 110 photographer who wanted a bit more quality out of that small format. So this one, as well as the zoom, as well as the focus, you got 3 other little hidden gem extras on it. First of all, you've got a hot shoe on the end next to the viewfinder, and it's a standard ISO hot shoe. So any ordinary hot shoe fitted flash gun will pop in there, and boff, you can use the thing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, day or night. You are there. And that does open up a world of creative photography, which having the ability to put flash in there. You could even, if you're going to be really advanced and clever, attach something like an Elinchrom Skyport into the side of that and have off-camera flash, which would be quite a thing with a 110 camera. I'm thinking a video coming on here. Secondly, you've got yourself a little screw mount for a tripod, so you can actually attach this thing to a tripod and walk away and have it perfectly mounted. And in conjunction with that, you've also got a little screw thread up top next to the shutter button for a cable release, which is pretty impressive. Now what this implies, first of all, is that the flash sync speed is 125th of a second. I hope it is, otherwise you're going to have some issues. Secondly, I'm not quite sure how useful a cable release and a tripod are going to be at 125th of a second, because if you can't be hand holding a camera at that shutter speed, then you've got other issues that are bigger than your 110 camera. I guess maybe it's so you can do self-portraits and group selfies and that kind of stuff. So whereas you can hold your iPhone out that far away and grab a shot, when you've got a 1.5 meter close focusing, unless Mr. Tickle is in your friend group, you're going to struggle with that, quite honestly. So I guess that is purely so you can do, you know, selfies and group shots. Although, thinking about it, the 2 or 3 meter long cable release cable is actually going to be bigger when it's wound up than the camera itself you're carrying around. So you might as well carry an ordinary camera and be done with it. So let's look at the quality we actually get from this thing, because it's quite good really, considering it's such a tiny little camera. First of all, let's look at the negatives, because they are absolutely tiny. I mean, 13 by 17 millimeters, as I say, they're dinky wee things. Compare that to a 35 millimeter negative. That is just, it's a quarter of the size of one of those. So not big. So looking at the actual quality of the images, it's, well, I can say surprisingly good. I shouldn't be surprised, because this is a really good lens. I mean, this is a chunky old bit of glass, 7 elements, big front element, gathering the light in and able to focus. Well, look at these things. I mean, getting it right is a little bit tricky because of all the things I've mentioned. But when you do, it's just marvellous. I mean, check out this little thing. This is up near Charing Cross, I think it was. This little teapot set, it's so crisp. You can see the grain so perfectly, because obviously it's, you know, a tiny negative, but the focusing quality is pin sharp. You can zoom and zoom and zoom and see so much detail in there. It really is good. Going to the infinity end of the lens, because obviously that's a bit easier to pin sharp it, because you're not trying to close focus with a few centimeters. This is just so crisp, so sharp, it's amazing. I'll do a separate video about this film, because this film is just weird. I do really rather like it, but it is definitely on the odd side. And that zoom does mean you get to play with different focal lengths a little bit and just change your aspect on things, which is great. So for the most part, every shot is pretty decent, and in fact better than you'd expect from your average 110 film camera. But every now and then you get something which really is really very good indeed. So it's not something you can guarantee you're going to get a great shot every time, but you know you're going to get something better than average, and it's really fun shooting with something so unusual as this. The one thing that did kind of confuse me a little bit is that the edge of the frame, as far as the camera is concerned, isn't particularly accurate. So in most of these images, in fact I think all of these images, as you zoom in, you can see the edge of the frame, but then also you've got a millimetre or two around the edge which is still recording the image, because it doesn't seem to cut it off completely. So your cut off for the frame is there, and then there's like a ghost image which continues just a little bit further out. So a little bit, I don't know, a bit strange really. I mean, I can't tell you how closely accurate that is to the viewfinder, because obviously it's parallax erroring off to the side, so it's never going to be 100% perfect. It really is though just a fun camera to use. I spent a couple of days walking around with it, just using the film up just to kind of get the feel for the thing. And every film photographer I saw who I started talking to, they were just instantly grabbed by this thing. They'd never seen anything like it and they loved it. If Fuji put this thing back into production today, they would sell a ton of them, because it's just so unusual. I really do like it. I mean, admittedly, you don't always get the best images. This image here is just a lineup of drift cars. If I shot that on my phone, it would be so much more crisp, better exposed, better depth of field, everything would be better. But here you've got so much atmosphere, the thing kind of takes you there. I do love this. I'm definitely going to put a couple more films through this before I give it back. So thank you, Anthony, this is wonderful. The only thing that makes it a little bit awkward is that position of the viewfinder, because it's so far over to the side. As I say, you are putting your thumb up your nose in order to wind on, but also I kind of naturally want to turn the camera that way to shoot a portrait with it. And if I've got a hat on, which I generally do when I go out, I'm not my hat off. I get my hand stuck under the brim of my hat on, not my cap off when I'm shooting with it. So I have to try and remember to shoot that way around, but then it's a little bit tricky to get in and focus. But yes, it's not the easiest thing in the world to actually physically use, but I think if you used it a lot, you would get the hang of it. The hand positions are just a little bit odd. Holding it with your right hand in order to use the shutter button, you do have to move your hand away from the wind on the back to the lens on the front with your left hand in order to focus it. So it's a little bit of a tricky thing, a little bit slow to use, but the thing with film photography is you do slow down anyway because you need to be sort of concentrating and making every frame count. If you've got 24 frames and it's costing you maybe nearly £1 a frame in order to buy the film and process it, you don't want to be messing around and just wasting them. So stopping to think is maybe not a bad thing. So this is the Fuji Fujica Pocket 350 Zoom. Would I recommend buying one of these things? I say yes. If you're a camera collector, if you like unusual cameras of different film formats that you can actually go out and use and get some decent shots with, 100% yes. It is a really, really unusual camera and I really did enjoy shooting with it. So thank you, Anthony, for the loan. I'm not sure I'm going to give it back to you because I want to keep on using it, to be honest. It's brilliant. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please hit like and of course subscribe and join me again for more old cameras, new cameras, walking around taking photos and that kind of stuff here on Clickbait. And see you again soon. Goodbye.